5 scores! Rick Vaughn.
We've decided to get ourselves back in the game again with our podcast.
Rick Vaughn, Gary Madden.
Probably the craziest story that you're ever going to hear about hockey.
We're going to be coming back to you on a regular basis.
You are listening to Squid and the Ultimate Leafs Fan.
Hello, Canada and hockey fans of the United States and Newfoundland, and an extra big hello to Canadian servicemen overseas.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 117 of the Squid and Ultimate Leaf Fan Show. I'm Mike Wilson, the Ultimate Leafs fan. Joining me, as always, my winger, Ricky Squid Vibe. Squid, how are we keeping?
Not bad, Mike. Nice trip out to Saskatoon for Hockey Helps the Homeless and got back. Still getting over the jet lag a little bit, but I'll be okay.
Well, as you can tell from the background, I'm in Victoria with on my Peterman book tour. So I'm trying to sell my beer league hockey book. So we're out here. I'm working a tournament starting tomorrow. And as I said, all the proceeds go to charity, folks. So keep that all in mind. And I was at the Men's World Rec Championships in Richmond, BC. And man, oh man, was that something else. 100 teams, 50 teams from Europe. So it was pretty impressive to see 4 teams from Australia, co-ed teams played in the tournament. So it was pretty amazing actually to see.
Wow.
Well, but with no further ado, our guest today, he actually was after a very solid career at the Brandon Wheat Kings, was taken 9th overall in the 1979 draft by the Toronto Maple Leafs, enjoyed a 14-year NHL career, mostly with the Winnipeg Jets, one of only 16 players to amass 500 points in 2,000 minutes and penalties. Laurie Boschman. Laurie, first off, thanks for joining us, and how's things?
Very good, Mike. Good to be with you and Squid and talk a little bit of hockey and stuff. So, yeah, everything's good. Can't complain.
How are you keeping busy these days?
I am. I still gainfully employed. I've been working with Hockey Ministries International, which is a Christian organization. We do hockey camps in schools and clinics, and I've been doing that for 30 plus years. And we're back doing our camps and stuff after COVID. Obviously everything got shut down for a period of time, but we're back going, back traveling, and things are pretty much back to normal, what they were pre-COVID.
So talk to us a little more about what that entails actually the camps. Are they for everybody? Are they for a certain sector of kid, or what is it? What does it stand for?
Yeah, they are. They are for everyone. They've been going on for Mike, about 45 years. They've been going on. We've had them there for boys and girls who play hockey, 9 to 17 years old, and we have them in 8 countries. We're in Canada, U.S., Sweden, Switzerland, Czech, Slovak.
Wow.
We actually used to have a camp in Lviv, Ukraine, a few years ago. Of course, that's not happening, and we've had one in Poland as well. But many times, obviously, in hockey playing countries. And what we try and do is we try and pass on, hockey skills, passing, skating, shooting, puck handling, but also we talk about faith and some principles from the Bible that these young athletes can apply to their lives. And it's for boys and girls. And we've done that for Hockey Ministries has been doing that for about 45 years. And I came online with them on a full-time position once I retired. I retired in 93, but I went full-time with them in 1994.
Squid?
Yeah.
Wow. So you must be pretty busy.
Yeah, Squid, it gets very busy in the summertime, of course, with hockey camps and everything. But, I've been doing it myself for 35 years. I was involved with them when I was an active player with the Winnipeg Jets back in 85. And, as we get a little bit older, Squid, I used to do anywhere between 4 and 6 camps a year. And our 3 boys, we had 3 boys. I used to bring them with me to different camps and used to bring 2 of my 3 boys with me at times to Europe. One of them didn't travel with me because he didn't like flying. So it was kind of nice that way, and it gave my wife a little bit of a break, not from being away and having me being traveling and her watching the 3 kids and stuff. But my kids played hockey too, so they really enjoyed that, had lots of fun with it. And but I'm trying to pass the baton a little bit to the younger generation now because it just makes it a little bit more difficult. As you were saying, you're out in Saskatoon and takes you a couple of days just to get over that, over being away and traveling and up late and, and all those kinds of things. So that's sort of the status of that right now.
As we get older, it gets a little bit tougher every trip.
Yeah.
Tell me about it, Squid. Tell me about it. Now, Laurie, you're a Western Canadian guy, born in Saskatchewan.
I am.
Talk about your early years playing hockey as a kid. I'm assuming you took to the game like most kids, and being a Western, I'm sure there was lots of pond hockey.
Yeah, of course, Mike, because, as you say, growing up in Saskatchewan, the weather's conducive to hockey out west. It still is, even with our climates slowly warming up. There's still lots of people that have hockey rinks outside. And of course, there's ponds and sloughs and stuff on the farm, and people skate on them, and it's a recreation activity. Back in our generation, for Squid and I, we didn't have we didn't have the electronics like they have today. We didn't have the internet, all those kinds of things. So we were outside a lot more, and there was myself and there was 4 siblings along with me in our family. There was 5 in total. So we spent a lot of time outside, and I just gravitated a little bit to hockey because a lot of my friends did, and the weather was conducive to it, and just started playing hockey, played it for fun like, many kids do. And when I was 9 years old, my parents moved east, if you would, from Saskatchewan to Brandon, Manitoba. And that's really where I got most of my formal training for hockey, was in Brandon. And of course, they had a junior team there. And as a 9-year-old kid, I really, I was a real sports guy, though. I played a lot of sports and did a lot of things. I did track and field and played basketball, volleyball, all those kinds of things. But hockey was something that I gravitated to. And back in our day, we didn't have the summer hockey like there is today. So we had a lot of other things that we did. We did the baseball and I even played field hockey. But I was a left-handed shot, but you can only the field hockey sticks are only for, you can only shoot right. So I had to adjust to that and adapt to that. But yeah, so Brandon was where I got most of my formal training for hockey. And I sort of had a bit of a dream when I went there and started watching the Brandon Wheat Kings that it'd be awfully nice to play junior hockey with the Brandon Wheat Kings. And so it just kind of evolved from there as as a young boy growing up, and then to coming to Brandon, Manitoba, and watching the Wheat Kings, and then thinking, boy, it would be great to someday try and play with that team.
Bosch, like in the summertime, as you mentioned, you play a lot of different sports. Things are a lot different today, where basically it's an 11-month-a-year job.
Yeah.
And, but I don't know. I just think playing other sports is really good for a hockey player, for whatever sport you play as a living. I think playing other sports really kind of helps you get into hockey and other different sports. I played everything.
Yeah, I think it helps gives you a bit of a well-rounded perspective on things. And of course, I think the great thing about sports, no matter what it is you play, whether it's basketball, baseball, football, that's the only sport I didn't play is football. But I think it helps you to understand what it's like to be nervous before games. It helps you understand like winning and losing, because then you have to adapt to that if you do lose, and you have to adjust to all of that. And of course, irregardless of that, it's really fun. You do it because you really have lots of fun, and you find some like-minded guys that you can kind of do those sports with. But I think there's some transferables, like when hockey's over, whether you play in the NHL or whether you just finish, house league hockey, competitive hockey. There's some transferable skills that you learn through sports that you can, kind of transfer to whether you go to school, and how you have to concentrate and focus, and what you have to do in order to get good marks, in order to, graduate, in order to get a diploma, in order to get an MBA, those kinds of things. So I think sports helps you, really helps you to learn a lot of things that are very important and that are transferable in other aspects of life. And so If you play one sport, I mean, it's great, but you and I both had the experience where we played several sports, and those kinds of things were good for us, and I think are good for young people today. But I don't disagree, Squid. The younger generation today, if you play competitive hockey, it ends up being a year-round thing, because you finish your winter hockey and then basically you're starting your summer, and then there's training, and nowadays there's diet, there's trainers, or joining a group of guys that have a trainer, and so if you're a competitive hockey player, it really is a full-time proposition now, it seems.
Yeah.
Now you played with the you ended up playing with the hometown Manitoba junior team, Brandon.
Yep.
Your second year, you put up some very good numbers, but also 139 minutes in penalties. Now you took that, graduated from that to your first year with the Brandon Wheat Kings, and put up some big numbers, like 42 goals, 57 assists, 99-point year, but 227 minutes in penalties. I should also mention there was a guy by the name, I think you may have heard of him, Bill Derlago, who had numbers maybe a little better than yours, which was pretty tough to do. But what I wanted to ask you, Laurie, was the aggressive part of your game. Was that always a part of your game, or was that just something you thought you had to do to add to? I mean, because those are pretty impressive offensive numbers.
Well, what happened, Mike, was in Brandon. Well, first of all, as a 16-year-old, my first coach was Andy Murray. So that name may be familiar with some hearing this today. Andy was an NHL coach for a number of years, but he was coaching the Brandon Travelers, which were the Tier 2 junior team. Team. And so I played with him first as a 16-year-old. He was coming out of Brandon University, was a real technical guy, and I really liked Andy. And I remember one time we were in Selkirk, and I'm 16 years old, and he put me with two of the bigger guys that year, Kerry Pedrick and Boyd Mullen. And those two guys were big guys. And back in the 70s, there was lots of fighting and all that kind of stuff in hockey, period, not just junior hockey. And so I remember as a rookie, the rookies had to go out back and forth and carry all the bags in and do all the grunt labor and stuff like that. And I remember bringing bags into the dressing room there in Selkirk, and Andy Murray's got Boyd and Kerry over on the side. And I'm going to grab my last two bags and stuff like that. And and he's got his back to me and stuff. And I heard him say, "And if anyone touches Bosch, I want you guys to kill them." It made me feel that much better, because, I was kind of cutting my teeth as far as, like fighting and all that kind of stuff. And we had a pretty good junior team, like a Tier 2 junior team that year. And we had a tough team. So that gave me confidence. And then it gave me confidence to know that if I wasn't doing so well, I had Boyd and Kerry that were going to come in and clean up and stuff. So, and then the next year, I was fortunate enough to play with the Brandon Wheat Kings as a 17-year-old. And Dunk McCallum was a former NHLer, was a defenseman for Pittsburgh. And he was my first coach. And of course, I played with a great a line. You had mentioned Billy Derlago. I took Billy's job. Oh, there's a photo there. Billy was ahead of me. He played with Brian Propp and Ray Allison, and they were an outstanding line. Billy got drafted by the Vancouver Canucks and went to Vancouver, and so I was a third line center at the time, and they put me up there in between, and we just clicked very well with Propp and Allison, and we had a very good 2 years together, and I was able to get drafted along with Propp and Allison and Brad McCrimmon that year because of the underage draft, because of the World Hockey Association. They disbanded in 1978-79 season, and so then we all got drafted together, and Brian and Brad and Ray were were draft age players, and myself and a bunch of others were underage players that because of the World Hockey Association disbanding and joining the NHL and all those labor laws that they had in place at the time. So I was quite fortuitous to slide in, between Billy's line mates in Propp and Allison. We had a great team those 2 years I played with the Brandon Wheat Kings.
Yeah, that was that draft year. I remember that very, very clearly. It was actually in August, if I'm not mistaken, and it was a phone draft.
It was a
So you're sitting at home waiting for a phone call.
Yeah.
I got a call saying that I got drafted by Vancouver, and I'm like, oh man, like my parents will be watching the game. It'll start at 10 o'clock in PEI. They won't be able to watch the whole thing.
Yeah. Squid, where were you? Were you in Birmingham, or where did you?
Yeah.
Birmingham. So I remember exactly where I was, because in the summer of 1979, 79-80, the hockey world was getting ready for the Olympics in Lake Placid, New York, in January. And so Hockey Canada, after we went to the Memorial Cup Championship and lost to the Peterborough Petes, and we came back to Brandon, and I got a call from Hockey Canada, and they said, we'd like you to come and try out for Canada's Olympic program. And my agent at the time was Alan Eagleson, and Alan said, Laurie, it's a good thing to do. And so I went to Calgary, and we were doing 2-a-days at the time, and that the draft came, and they gave myself and another guy by the name of Paul Reinhardt, they gave us the morning off that particular day that they had that 6-round conference call in the summer of 1979. And so I was in the basement of the old Calgary Corral, along with Paul Reinhardt, and one telephone and a rep from Hockey Canada. And the deal was, when the phone was going to ring, we were both told we were probably going to be high first round picks. And so that's why they gave us the day, the morning practice off. And the phone rang, and the rep from Hockey Canada picked it up and said, Laurie, it's for you. And I picked up and said, hello. And the first person I talked to was Harold Ballard. And he said, Laurie Boschman, welcome. We just taken you in the first round. And I talked to King Clancy after that. And I talked to Floyd Smith. And anyways, that's how I found out I was drafted in 1979. So.
What did you know about Toronto besides what you'd seen on TV? I mean, had you ever been there before?
I had not. No, Mike. I shouldn't say that. I had been to Toronto. I've never been to Maple Leaf Gardens, but we have family in Welland, Ontario. So I had been through Toronto on numerous occasions. Being a Westerner, we would drive out west to see our cousins in Welland. So, but I'd never been to Maple Leaf Gardens before. And of course, because I followed hockey, and back out west, we only had 2 channels, CBC and CTV. So we would always watch hockey, and my dad was a big Boston Bruin fan, and therefore I was a Boston Bruin fan. We didn't like the Montreal Canadiens, but because you can't be a Bruin fan and like the Canadiens, right?
Not a chance.
But of course, as someone who followed hockey, I knew who all the players were. It's kind of like, and Squid would have stories like this, Mike, and you guys have probably talked about this when other people you've been talking about on this podcast, but I played in 82-83, I played in Edmonton with the Oilers, and Gary Unger was finishing his career. That was his last year. So, I played with Ungie, and he became a friend of mine, and when I was, I don't know how old Gary was, probably 37 or so, and I was 22. And anyways, after I met him and stuff, I say, hey, Ungie. And after I became more comfortable with him and stuff like that, I said, hey, Ungie, like when I was a kid, my dad, we used to collect these Esso power play cards. And I said, you'd go to Esso and buy a book, and like for about, $2, and then it had every NHL team in it. And so the only way you could get the players was you had to get 25 liters of gas at Esso. So, and then they'd give you these stickers, and then you'd put them in the book and all that kind of stuff. Well, I'm telling Ungie the story, and I said, so Ungie, I'd always be on my dad. Dad, we need gas. We need gas. So we play hockey, and Dad, let's go fill up gas. So Dad would always go and do that, and we'd always buy gas at Esso. It was a brilliant marketing move, right?
No question.
And so anyways, I used to say, like, when I used to fill up my St. Louis book, because that's who Gary Unger was playing with at the time, I said, Ungie, I used to trade you all the time at recess in school. I said, I had so many extra Gary Unger cards. I used to, well, he just died laughing, right? Because as a player, you don't know these things are going on. Like they don't know that, they're taking your image and making an SO power play book. And kids like me who follow hockey and everything are collecting it. But Gary thought that was just hilarious, but that's what happens. I mean, like Squid, I was able in 1979, my first year in the league, I was able to play against Gordie Howe. Gordie was in his last year with Hartford playing with Mark and Marty. And I mean, it was just a thrill for me to play against Gordie Howe because he was the same age as my father. He was 52 years old. And, and that's a memory I have, forever. It's just, I not only was a fan of Gordie Howe, but I got to actually play in 3 games that year against the Hartford Whalers. Yeah. And I played against Gordie Howe. So there's lots of those fun things when you look back on your career.
Yeah, I got to play against him the year before that in the WHA. And I remember the first time we played them at home. I played center right up till junior, and Brof used to have me take the faceoffs on the right side in our zone if it was an important draw. So I won it. They shot it down the ice because they had pulled the goalie. We were up a goal. So I beat the guy to the puck. I come around the net. I turn around to put it in the net. And the next thing I know, I'm on the ice, and I don't know where the heck I am. And I'm crawling to the bench because I can't get up. And then the next morning, we look at the film, and it was Gordie when he was back checking, and he got right beside me, and he went like this, hit me in the back of the head. And Brophy's yelling at me, get off the ice, get off the ice. And I'm trying to crawl to the bench.
Yeah, there's lots of those. There's lots of stories. Through the years, you talk to players who played with and against him, and who felt the wrath of Gordie right through those elbows or whatever. And it's really amazing. Yeah.
Now, Laurie, you talk about your first camp. You were come in obviously with some bigger expectations, being a high pick, some big offensive numbers. You had an aggressive part to your game. Mm-hmm. How did the players treat you, and how did it all go?
Well, they were fantastic, Mike. There's no doubt about that. I think one of the biggest things was I was, very intimidated coming to, Toronto. I mean, we stayed at the Westbury Hotel, which was kind of, on Yonge Street there, just across the street from Maple Leaf Gardens. You could just walk across, and they had the WWE there, or maybe it was WWF at the time. I can't remember, World Wrestling Federation or World Wrestling, whatever. And I walked into that Westbury Hotel, and there was the biggest man in my life I ever saw checking in at that hotel, the Westbury Hotel. And it turned out to be Andre the Giant. Okay. And I had no idea who Andre the Giant was, but the guy was massive. He had mitts on him, like we're just absolute like hockey gloves. And he was, I don't know how tall he is, like he was in real life. I know he's passed away. He was like 6'9" or something. But he was thick. I'd never seen a person as big as him in my life. And I was just like, holy, I hope he's not coming to training camp. That was my thought. And they said, no, wrestling's in, tomorrow night and stuff. So anyways, I mean, I was quite intimidated, but what made me feel really good, like when we had our first, we were up at North York at the rink north of the city. And when the wrestling moved out of town, we were back at Maple Leaf Gardens. And I remember I'm skating out on the ice because back then they had rookie camp, and rookie camp was first, and then the main camp was secondary. And then they'd keep the rookies and those kinds of things that they wanted to come to main camp. And so when main camp started, we were at Maple Leaf Gardens. And of course, I knew, Darryl Sittler and Ron Ellis and Tiger Williams and Lanny McDonald and those players, because I was a hockey fan and they were larger than life to me. And I remember I was skating around the ice, and, Squid, where, behind the home bench and stuff, is where the dressing room is. And we were, of course, in the other dressing rooms, in the corner and stuff as rookies. And I was just watching as the main group started to filter on the ice, and I was looking at that, going, oh, there's I was looking, skating, handling a puck, going, hey, there's Maurice Salvage, like, there's Ron Ellis, and then Darryl Sittler came on the ice, and the only thing that saved me from running into the end boards was I saw the red goal line at the end, and it made me turn real quick. Otherwise, I would have ran right into the end of the boards, because I was just looking like all these NHLers that I had seen on TV, and now they're coming onto the ice, and it was like, wow. Well, Darryl and I had the same agent, as did Lanny McDonald, which was Alan Eagleson, and Eagleson must have told him, hey, listen, say something to Boschman. He's he's one of my clients too, or whatever. And Darryl Sittler came over and said, hey, took his glove off and said, hey, I'm Darryl Sittler. It's kind of like, yeah, I know who you are. And it was kind of like, huh, and he said, hey, said, listen, kid, he said, just do what you did in junior hockey. He said, and you'll just be fine. He said, just relax and play your game. And just the fact that Darryl would say that to me, being the captain of the team and all those kinds of things, just made me feel so much more relaxed and better. And then again, Darryl was a great leader and became a good friend and stuff. The time, my 3 years that I was there, and he got traded just before I did. And so anyways, those are just some of the things I recall about training camp.
Squid.
Yeah, that's amazing. I went to Vancouver, and the same thing. It was like, I didn't really know a lot of the guys on Vancouver, but the one guy I remembered was Donnie Lever, and he was our captain, and he took good care of me. And even though Harry Neal said he beat me in the 5-mile run in training camp, which is a lie, because I don't even know if he could walk 5 miles, but and then that just kind of festered for quite a while. And then the next thing I know, I'm off to Toronto in February of my first year.
Okay.
And living with you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Mike, did you know that? Or maybe
he told we talked about that before.
Yeah, that's great.
And Joel Quinville's brother, what was his name again?
I want to say John.
Okay, yeah, it might have been.
I thought it was Johnny Quinville. Yeah.
Well,
I was going to ask you, Laurie, now your first year, do you remember anything? Were you able to take it in and enjoy it, or was it just a blur as the days were going by?
Oh, no, absolutely. You absorb everything, Mike. Yeah, everything. Yep. Yeah. It was terrific. It was, all that I can say, Mike, it's probably like Squid could attest to. It's like a dream come true. You think, I'd like to, first of all, I'd like to make the Brandon Wheat Kings, and then you make it, and you start to play, and you start to feel comfortable, and then all of a sudden, we have a really good team. Billy Derlego leaves, I join in there.
Yep.
And it kind of fits, and then you think, well, I'd really like to play in the NHL, but I don't know if I'm good enough. Then you go to training camp, and they say, when Floyd Smith said, Laurie, get a place, you made the hockey club. The first thing I did was I went outside the dressing room, and there was a bank of payphones just to the right of our dressing room. And I put in a nickel and called my parents collect, and shared the joy, and said, hey, they said I made the team. And so, yeah, I remember a lot, my first game at the Forum in Montreal, and just playing in front of the fans in Toronto there at Maple Leaf Gardens was just a great experience, playing for the Leafs and those kinds of things. So, yeah, I have lots of fond memories, but I think more than anything, as you look back on your career, at least this is what I would say, Squid, is, I was fortunate enough to play 14 years, and you look back and yeah, the cities you played in, I played in, Toronto, Edmonton, Winnipeg, New Jersey, and finished here in Ottawa, but it's the people, it's the players that you played with, and the memories you have, of the individuals that you were with and stuff that really stick out. And then the friendships that you maintain and develop over the years and stuff that's real special. And, so I remember lots about my first year, Mike.
Yep.
Yeah, you do make a lot of you really like those moments where you get to meet people, you get to know them a little bit, and you have lifelong talks with them. And like Billy, I mean, I call Billy every once in a while, and he last time I was talking to him, he has a big garden in the backyard. He grows these big tomatoes and all kinds of stuff. So he's telling me in the summer when one day there was nobody home but him. He was out in the garden and it was like 100 degrees. He said one of those real hot days, and he fell and broke his leg and screwed up his knee. And he said, "There's nobody to help me." And he says, "I'm crawling around like a worm in the garden trying to get out of there."
Well,
and it's like, so you kind of miss those things when you retire, because you don't see a lot of the guys anymore.
Yeah. Well, it's absolutely the truth. And one of the things I remember about Billy, of course, I played with Billy and stuff like that in Brandon, and then I played with him in Winnipeg as well. And one of the things I remember was when Billy signed in Vancouver the year before I did, and he came back in the summertime and stuff. And I remember seeing him around town, and he had this really nice Lincoln Continental.
Yeah.
A 2-door Lincoln, and it was just kind of, and Billy was just great with us. I remember him driving around in that thinking, wow, he's arrived, he's made it. And Billy just being the guy he is, it's great and stuff. But what's interesting, I'll say this, we have lots of acquaintances and we have lots of commonality with the individuals that we played with and against, and now Mike, Squid and I have been retired from the game, and we do different things. But oftentimes we run into former players and stuff. So you have that bond, that commonality, all of that kind of stuff. But it's interesting, that when I was playing, I had talked. You have lots of talks when you're on the road and stuff. You're always eating dinner with different players and sometimes some of the same players and those kinds of things. And you're talking about all kinds of things about life and everything. But it was interesting. One of the times I was talking to Ronnie Ellis and played with Ronnie. That was my first year, and it was Ronnie's last. So I think Ronnie had played 15 years in the NHL. And one of the things that stuck out about Ronnie that he mentioned to me, and he said this, he said, "Bosch, I played 15 years in the NHL. And he said, I've had a lot of different teammates, won the Stanley Cup." And he said, "But he said, you'll be lucky if you have a long career," he said, "that you'll have 2 or 3 good friends at the end of your career." And I just, I was taking everything in and stuff. And I on another occasion on the road, I talked to Darryl Sittler, and Darryl at the time, I think, before he got traded to Philadelphia, I think he'd been an 11-year pro at that time, like with the Leafs. And he told me something similar, except he didn't say, Ronnie Ellis said, "You'll be lucky to have 3 or 4. And Darryl Sittler said, "You'd be lucky to have a couple of good friends." So that being said is that, I was single my whole time, during my time with the Leafs. So I didn't know really who any of the girlfriends or wives were or anything like that. It wasn't until, I married Nancy in Winnipeg that, we started doing more things with couples and stuff. But all that to say is it's true. We have lots of acquaintances and lots of similarities and commonalities because of what we used to do. But sometimes, there's only a couple of people you really connect with and that you remain good friends with over the course of time. And it's true. Mm-hmm. Now, I might not be close friends with, I'll just use Billy Derlego's name because we mentioned his name, but what happens is you pick up right where you left off when you see each other again, which is kind of nice. But you might not be in contact as regularly as you normally would. But so that's something to remember. I think it's like you have this great game that we're playing, and you're trying to help your team win a cup, and you have a lot of this, a lot of stuff in common, but yet you probably only stay in touch with a few people when the game is really done. And that's not unusual, because you can't spread yourself out with 30 different guys. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, but that's why I like doing all these events, and especially the Leaf alumni games that I play in, because not only do I see some of the guys I played with, but I see I get to meet a lot of guys that played for the Leafs that I never played with. So that's kind of nice. It's like you go to Saskatoon, you were there, Dave Babbage, a lot of guys that I played against, and you kind of, like you said, you pick up kind of right where you left off, and you start talking about the good old days and other things, and it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy doing all those.
Yeah. Well, it's great.
And
it's
Squid's
great
defense.
To talk about
Sorry. Yeah, no, go.
I was just going to say it's great for those of us who love hockey to talk about hockey, because we like, we can talk about it when we played, because it was different, in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s than it is today. And the game today is great. I mean, it's skill level, and Nathan McKinnon and Connor McDavid's, and just it's just incredible, the speed and that in which these players are playing at, and Cale Makar, and and here in Ottawa, it doesn't look like we're going to make the playoffs again, but we've got some young talent that appears to be. Tim Stützle is a nice player to watch. He's got great skill. But back in our day, those guys wouldn't have been able to play as much, just because they'd have guys like me hooking and holding and slashing and doing all that kind of stuff, right? So that's why it's great to watch it today, because they've really taken that stuff out of it. And in fact, the Quebec Major Junior League is talking about banning fighting, which is kind of like, wow, I never thought it would come to that. And I mean, for me, I still like the occasional fight. I mean, guys are competing, right? So I just,
now, Bosch, I was going to say to you, we'll get to this part here. What went wrong for you in Toronto? Now, let me preface it by saying it wouldn't be a Leaf-centric podcast without Harold Ballard featured. Sure. And you're not alone in this regard. Believe me, every player we have come on, there's always a Harold story. Now, he made some cutting remarks about you and your faith, but Harold had comments about everybody, as everybody knows. As this was all circulating around you, what was your mindset at the time? And just, again, as I started this off, what do you think went wrong in Toronto?
Yeah, well, you know what? I'd happy to share it. Squid, I like that. And Mike, you probably saw it too, that documentary, that hour-and-a-half documentary on Harold Ballard and stuff like that. Like, I thought it was very good, very insightful. There's some things there that I didn't know prior to, how he got control of the team and stuff. But no, let me tell you, Mike, very briefly what happened. And a lot of people, a lot of it was public knowledge because it was reported on, but there was some stuff that wasn't reported on. Anyways, when you're a first round pick, just like Squid with Vancouver, the expectations are such that, that first rounders, you're going to do certain things. And I think the Leafs were quite happy with my first year. Year two, I go into Quebec City when the Nordiques were still playing. I got in a fight with Robbie Ftorek, who was a chippy little centerman, and ended up being my assistant coach when I was playing for New Jersey in the Devils. And anyways, I fought Robbie, and I gave him an uppercut, and I chipped his tooth, and I cut my finger. And so I went off at the end of the second period. The doctors in Quebec City sewed me up, and we fly back. We took that Convair 640 Squid that we used to take a lot and we went back to Toronto after the game. The next day I go in to see Guy Kinnear, our trainer, and my hand was swollen up, like it looked like someone had blown air into it, and it was going up my arm. Well, what had happened was that you sent me to the doctor right away. I had blood poisoning, because what had happened when I gave him the uppercut, I got some infection from his tooth, because the doctor said there's so much bacteria in your mouth. They should have gave me a tetanus shot that night in Quebec City, and they didn't. And so I got blood poisoning, and so it was running up my arm. Anyways, I was in the hospital for 3-4 days. I missed 3 weeks because of it. And all that to say is my second year was cut short because of injuries and different things like that. And so I didn't have as strong a year my second year as my first. Now, on top of that, just internally, my life was, changing. I came to faith in Christ and became a Christian, and now there was internal talk. My teammates were great, like Sittler and Salming and all those kinds of guys. Ronnie Ellis was gone, and they were all really good. But now there was talk that Boschman's got religion. And so, of course, all my teammates knew there was a change in my lifestyle and all that kind of stuff. And so after my second year, there was some rumblings from management that maybe it's Boschman's religion. That's the reason that he's not playing well. And so anyways, I start my third year off, and I still hadn't. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention this, Squid and Mike. I got mononucleosis. And mononucleosis kind of just zapped the energy out of me and all that kind of stuff. And so I only played like 50 games at my second year. So I start the third year. So the expectations are high. Okay, Boschman, first rounder, he's got to produce and all that kind of stuff. And really, it's all on me. I just didn't play well. I got off to a terrible start and all that kind of stuff. And now I'm starting to hear it more and more from the coaches and stuff like that. Well, maybe it's his religion. Maybe that's what the problem is. Anyways, so one day I come in. Mike Nicolak is now the coach of the Leafs. It's my third year in Toronto and stuff like that. And he says, Bosch, he said, after practice there, he said, I want you to go, I'll use Squids. I want you to go see Dr. Vive over at the Westbury Hotel, or the, what was the closest hospital there? I forget the name of it.
Wellesley. The Wellesley.
Yeah.
Go see Dr. Vive. He's our team psychiatrist. Well, nobody in 1980 had a psychiatrist, right? And so it's like, oh, okay. So I went, I went over to see Dr. Vive and things like that, and had a nice chat with him and all that kind of stuff. And he was talking to me about my faith and talking to me about my career, my family, all that kind of stuff. 2 days later, I get a call from my parents in the evening. My mom and dad were on the telephone in tears, crying. Mike Nicolak, the coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs, called my dad at his place of work and said, Joe, it's Mike Nicolak here. We sent Laurie to see Dr. Vive, our team psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist's report came back today, and the psychiatrist said he's brainwashed. Is there anything you and Dora can do to
Brainwashed.
My parents thought I joined a cult. They thought it was unbelievable. And so I was saying, no, Mom and Dad, I'm all right. But anyways, and then it got out in the newspaper. Boschman's got too much religion. What had happened was we were playing back-to-back games in New York at Madison Square Gardens. And so we played Madison Square Gardens, and Dick Beddoes was interviewing Harold Ballard. Now, I'm a single guy. I might have been living with Squid at the time. No, Squid was not there. It was my second year. I was alone. I had a place downtown alone. And we played New York. And so after the game, again, we chartered back from New York to Toronto. And so anyways, no problem. We lost the game and things like that. I mean, that wasn't no problem, but I mean, we played a game and went back. And so the next morning at practice, the next morning at practice, Darryl says to me, hey, Bosch, he said, last night I came home about 2 a.m. and he said, Wendy, Darryl's first wife, Wendy had a note on the door. Darryl, turn on the VCR. And so Darryl came in at 2 a.m. The VCR was set, and there was an interview that Harold Ballard was interviewed in between the second and third period by Dick Beddoes. And in that interview, basically, Harold Ballard says, yeah, we're going to trade Boschman or send him to the minors because he's got too much religion. Well, I go into practice the next morning. Darryl tells me this, and Sit says, Bosch, just get ready because the media is going to want to ask you about this after. And so, of course, after practice, there was all the media. And back in the early 80s, Squid, as you know, there wasn't Sportsnet, TSN, all that kind of stuff, but there was still lots of media. And so, of course, the media come to me right after and they go, Laurie, did you hear what happened last night? And I said, yeah, actually, Darryl just told me. And they said, what's your comment? And my comment was, and this was all in the papers and everything, I said, I think it's Mr. Ballard's ignorance towards Christianity that he'd make a statement like that. Because Ballard basically accused me of being soft and it being my religion that was impeding me as a player, which was just absolutely ridiculous. And so shortly thereafter, I don't know when that was. It was before Christmas, and then it just got nuttier. And then they traded. I think they traded Lanny, and then they traded Lanny and Jerry Butler, and then Sit took the C off, and it was just getting nutty there because Punch Imlach was doing all kinds of stuff, and I could see the writing on the wall was not so good. And so I asked Al, I said, Al, could you maybe find another team for me to play, because they had sort of given up on me. And then fortunately in March of 82, I got traded to the Oilers, and so it gave me a sort of a breath of life. And unfortunately, I played there for 82, 83, those 2 years, and that was the year the Oilers went to the Stanley Cup final and lost to the Islanders, and so I wasn't able to get my name on the cup. I got traded to Winnipeg, but it turned out to be pretty good for my career to play in Winnipeg for the Jets. And we had a pretty good team there. And the Stanley Cup champion came out of that old Smythe division. I was there 7 years. It came 6 out of the 7 years. The Oilers won 5 cups and Calgary won another one. And I think in between there, the Canadians won a cup. But that Smythe division, of course, was because Edmonton and Calgary were in it. It was a tough division, and you had to score lots of goals and to get out of there. And I think the Oilers at the time had, I think, there 6 or 7 Hall of Famers, so they could beat you a lot of different ways, either with Gretzky, Curry, Anderson, Messier, Coffey, Grant Fuhr. There was a lot of different ways they could hurt you. And we had a good team with Howard Chuck and Paul McLean, Brian Mullen, Thomas Steen, Dave Babbage, those kinds of individuals. But we just could not beat them in the playoffs, which was really frustrating.
Well, now, Laura, I know you're on a schedule, and we don't want to keep you because you have another call to make. We have so much more to talk to you about, which we'd love to get into a little bit more of your time in Winnipeg, and also playing with Gretzky and Messi and Coffey and stuff. So maybe we'll have to bring you back on and that's down the road some point and get through that if you can. But Squid, final comment before we let Laurie go.
Well, I mean, all I can say is back then in Toronto, everything was just a circus, basically, with Harold Ballard and putting Laurie through that and saying the things he did. He said it about a lot of other guys too. I mean, I remember the one time I'm getting on the charter and Harold's behind me and Gary Lima's behind him, and it was after the third 50-goal season and my contract was up, and in the paper that day they said Harold's going to have to open up his pocketbook for Vive. And he pokes me in the back, and I turn around and I said, "Yes, Mr. Ballard." He goes, "If you think you're getting another dime out of me," he said, "you're crazy." And I'm like, okay, whatever. Like, talk to my agent.
Yeah, exactly. No, now, he was a character. I mean, and it was just different times. But he did what he wanted. He didn't have to worry. Mike and Squid knows this. Didn't have to worry about filling up Maple Leaf Gardens because it was full every night, and he didn't have to worry about any of that kind of stuff. And I think he just ran it the way he wanted to and said what he did and didn't care if he burned bridges or hurt feelings. And, as a hockey player and someone who's a public figure, you learn very quickly that you have to have thick skin, right? Because there's going to be some in the media that say, Boschman can't skate anymore. He can't do this. He can't do that. He can't score. He can't. So when they say good things about you, you're going to have to, and if you believe that and all that kind of stuff, then you're also going to have to be able to take it, at least if you have some critics that say you're no good or whatever. But when, I was just, I came in as a 19-year-old, Squid, just like yourself. And, I was 20 and 21 years old, like 19 to 21, those 3 years I was in Toronto. And I mean, my faith had nothing to do with the fact that I wasn't playing well, but I mean, it's an easy target. It's like it's like them saying, well, so-and-so drinks too much. Well, it's got to be his drinking that's causing this problem or whatever, like that kind of thing. Right. So
well, let's just put it this way, Laurie, boss, before we let you go, just my final comment would be, let's just put it this way. Between 1979 and 1984, the Leafs had 6 different coaches. And so my thought to you would be, or my question to you, or your final thought would be, under different circumstances, once this sort of circus got some sort of grounding and got some sort of level of stability, you think things maybe worked out a little different for you in Toronto, because you came right in the middle of like all this upheaval.
Yeah, I mean, those things are impossible, to know for sure, Mike. Right?
But we like to fantasize on this show sometimes.
Well, one of the things I will say, I mean, it was an absolute honor, and I think Squid can attest to this too, to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs, one of the, most iconic, key franchises in North America. It was great playing for the Leafs. I really enjoyed my 3 years there, my time there. Just have so many great memories. Have some good friends, from my time there. So I have nothing but good memories. I mean, sometimes difficulty happens, to many of us, and just that photo that you're showing, that person off to my left shoulder, that looks a lot like a guy I got traded for, Walt Podubny. And I remember, I'll tell you a story too, along with that, Mike and Squid. I got traded for Walt Podubny and Phil Drouillard when I got traded from Edmonton to Toronto. So the Oilers are in Maple Leaf Gardens for the first time, and there's a big sign that says, "Walt for Laurie, we're not sorry."
Well, I think you said it best, Bosch, that if you're going to play in Toronto or Montreal or maybe New York City, or probably any of the Canadian cities, if you don't have thick skin, you're not going to survive. Yeah.
You just have
and
to.
I think you said it best. I mean, if you don't have thick skin and let things roll off your back, you're not going to have success in any of those markets. Yeah.
No, you just have to learn to deal with that, and it's part of a passionate fan base. It really is. And then you have, media today that we never had back in the day with TSN and Sportsnet and like all this stuff online and podcasts and blogs and everybody adding their own, Twitter. I mean, my goodness, like I don't think I could. I don't think if I was a player today, I would go on any of those social platforms, because you're bound to get where, like, all of a sudden Boschman's in a 10-game slump or hasn't scored in 15 and he's supposed to score. And, can you imagine what would be said? Like, I can't imagine. Right. So it's kind of like, oh my goodness. Like, it's even amped up that much more in today's NHL than it was back in the, 70s, 80s and 90s, right, when we played. So, but it's But again, it's a thrill to play for the Leafs. I learned lots, played with some great character individuals. I learned a lot from them, and so it made me a better person at the end of the day. And you look at those difficulties and those trials that we go through, whether it be injuries or, being ridiculed for your faith or whatever, and you kind of go, I think those things, sometimes it is, people's ignorance towards that, and you just kind of move on, and you're trying to conduct yourself as professionally as you can, and you try and let your actions as a hockey player, at some point you have to perform. And I was able to play another 11 years after those 3 in Toronto for a 14-year career. And, for that, I'm just grateful. I'm grateful to God for the ability to play hockey and for the ability to do that, to enjoy something I enjoyed, to make the money we made when we played. And so I feel nothing but gratitude,
Well, listen, Laurie Bosch, on a final note here, just so we'll let you go, is the fact, like you mentioned you played another 11 years. You did prove that you could play in the league. If it means anything, the Toronto Maple Leafs are 4th overall in the league, and if they lose a game, they're ready to fire the coach, they trade Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, they want Brendan Shanahan fired, they want Kyle Dubas fired. They lose one game, they're 4th overall in the league and a couple points out of 2nd overall. So nothing has changed playing in this city. But I'll leave you with this thought is, as a testimony to the type of player you were, and I think you should probably take this, I'm sure you do, as a real honor, that the Ottawa Senators named you their first captain. So that speaks a lot about your career to that point and becoming the captain of that hockey club.
Well, thank you very much for that, Mike. I mean, it was that was my most challenging year out of the 14 that I was able to play, being on an expansion team. I think we only won 10 or 11 games that year. That was really, really tough. But again, looking back, as a hockey player, you look back on those years, and it was a grind mentally. But you look back with fond memories, being able to be here, being back in the nation's capital, if you would. They used to have hockey back in the early 1900s, and they actually won several Stanley Cups,
right.
And those kinds of things. And we've made this home. We've made this home, and we raised our children here, and we love we love the nation's capital. It's great, and they've got a passionate fan base here. And looks like, obviously we're going to get new ownership here. Eugene Melnick unfortunately passed away, and his girls want to sell the team. So we're going to have some new ownership here, and there's a lot of excitement about that. And the fact that we've got some good young pieces, so to speak, as they say in the hockey business. And, with Stützle and Kachuk and hopefully Norris, a healthy Norris next year at center. And you got Chikrin, Shabbat, and this Jake Sanderson's a real nice hockey player. Jeff Sanderson's son, who Rick and I both played against. So there's some optimism in town here after 6 years. Doesn't look like we're going to make the playoffs here this year, but there's some optimism in town, which is really good. It's really quite nice. And so you just have to, as being in the 7 Canadian cities, people love hockey in this country, and you just have to, when things are not going good in places like, Vancouver or whatever, or as you say, Mike, if the Leafs go on a bit of a stretch where they're not winning and they want to trade and fire everybody, it's just the nature of the business, right? And everybody's got an opinion, and you just have to kind of deal with that. And I think it would be hard as a general manager and coach, because you got to stay focused on what it is you're trying to do, because there's a lot of competing voices out there for you, saying, get rid of this guy, get rid of that guy. Maybe they should do this, maybe they should do that. And, anybody in charge of these teams as coach and GM, they're trying to do their utmost, to try and produce winning hockey for their fans. But it makes it even more difficult in a place like Toronto, when you can spend $100 million. If the cap was $100 million, they can afford to do that, unlike other teams, but they've got to stay within the cap. And then you pay certain, you allocate certain amounts of money to certain players, and then you don't have a lot left over, and you got to kind of, so that's what even things up and makes it kind of interesting. And I think, as much as people maybe don't like Bettman, I think he's done a lot of good things for the game of hockey. And I think he's done a lot of things for the players. The salary cap came in, when it did come in, at 39.5, and now it's up to 82.5 or 83.5. So, that's pretty good at shared revenues. So the players are making more money, the owners are making more money. The game of hockey is healthy, and that's really positive. And for those of us who love and follow hockey, it's just nothing but good news.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, Laurie, we can't thank you enough for joining us today. Really appreciate some great insights. I know you got another couple calls to make here today, so we're going to let you run. So again, thanks very much, and best down the road.
Well, thanks very much, Mike. Squid, good to be on this podcast with you, and we'll see you again soon, Squid.
All right, buddy.
Okay. Thanks,
Bob.
Bob.